It's been well over a decade since a true new home console Mario Kart game, but with Mario Kart World right around the corner, Nintendo is clearly shaking up a lot with this newest entry. From what Nintendo has shown off so far, and all the footage from the preview events, there is a lot to be excited for here in my opinion. In fact, this video is going over 10 of what I think are the biggest improvements for Mario Kart World in comparison to past Mario Kart games. There's some stuff here I'm really excited for, and I just want to talk about it. So let's jump right into it. These are in no particular order. So let's start it off with the first improvement, that is increased verticality. When looking at just how this game plays, there are a lot of different mechanics that are working together here to seemingly give the gameplay this increased verticality, which looks super duper fun. The first thing that we have to mention is a brand new mechanic known as the charge jump. This will, well, allow you to charge a jump and get a trick as well. This can be used to jump over certain items and also jump up to walls and rails you can ride on. There's also a returning item, that being the feather, which gives you an even higher jump. This can also supposedly be used to dodge blue shells, so good to keep that in mind. But yeah, the feather was a battle mode exclusive item in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but now we can actually use it in the races. On top of those two ways to gain verticality in this game, there's also a third, which is that pretty much everything just seems to be bouncy. If you land on other racers, which is easier to do because of this increased vertical mobility, you then bounce off of them. So what is the point of this increased verticality? Well, from a gameplay perspective, it definitely is fun. It adds additional stuff to do, but what makes it even cooler is that Nintendo is adding stuff to do once you're in the air. Obviously, I mentioned rails to hop on and walls to ride on, but now there are question blocks in the air and even these music note blocks that you can bounce off of. Not to mention, you can also now trick multiple times while you're in the air. This is just more stuff to do while you're driving, which will be particularly appreciated during some of this game's intermissions, where the actual layouts of the course seem a bit more tame than we're used to. The next big improvement I want to talk about are the costumes. Now, I'd like to make it clear here, I am not talking about how you pick the costumes or how you unlock them here. Unfortunately, that's because I think both of those look kinda dumb. How you pick the costumes on the character select screen is ridiculous. Why do they take up their own character selection spots? It's not a huge deal, but every time you race in Mario Kart World, specifically with someone who hasn't already played the game, laying out every single option here will take a minute because people are naturally gonna want to see every single costume. It'll take longer, and it's also way less convenient to have them organized this way. How you unlock the costumes too also looks pretty dumb. They're tied to the Yoshi's food item, which is just a mushroom in a different font and also unlocks a costume. However, putting those two factors to the side, the actual costumes themselves, I can't lie, they look sick. There are a lot of great options here, and they seem to all have great varieties, so that even if a character is missing maybe a specific costume you'd want, chances are they'll have one that's similar enough. In particular, some of my favorite costumes we've seen so far are the Aristocrat King Boo, the Shy Guy Slope Styler, and Mario's Sunshine outfit. All three of those are huge standouts to me just from what we've been seeing. Of course, there are plenty of other cool ones we've seen. I can't go over them all here because there's just so many of them. But yeah, the actual designs of the costumes look sick. Great improvement from past games. The next thing I want to talk about is riding on walls. In my mind, this is an improvement over anti-grav. Not only that, this is kind of what anti-gravity should have been. Anti-gravity was the main marketing gimmick for Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, and I personally loved it, and I loved its implementation. It allowed for such creative track design, but it never felt super disorienting or confusing because the camera would always follow with you. In fact, there were often times in that game you wouldn't necessarily realize you were in anti-gravity. The only things that actually changed were obviously the background itself, because, you know, you're upside down, but also now bumping into cars and these little rotating pillars would give you a boost. So as far as like gameplay ramifications, anti-gravity wasn't that crazy. The biggest ramification it had was allowing the developers to get really creative with track layouts. Riding on walls, on the other hand, makes it look like you can kind of just activate anti-gravity on any wall you want. On something like Toad's Harbor, there's a wall here that you can drive on in anti-gravity. But because of the way this game's anti-gravity functions, it's essentially like an entirely different path. You have to choose to go up there for the entire duration of the wall. You can't just hop on, hop off like you can in Mario Kart World. I think due to a lot of the bigger changes in this game, namely the main open world mechanic, some of the smaller but still very notable additions like riding on walls have been a little forgotten about, but this truly does kind of feel like the next evolution for anti-gravity in a way where it's a completely different ability and power-up, but kind of keeps the original idea that all of us thought anti-gravity might be when it was initially revealed to be the gimmick for Mario Kart 8. The fourth improvement I want to talk about are the dang retro tracks. I'm not going to talk about which retro tracks they chose, because that's entirely opinion based and could honestly be its own video, but I'm mainly talking about how well they've improved some of the, let's just say, weirder picks. As soon as I saw Sky High Sundae was coming back, I was absolutely lost. Why would Nintendo bring this course back? It wasn't particularly liked by, well, pretty much anyone. In fact, most people I've talked to say they kind of dislike it. Myself included, I don't think it's fun. But just seeing what they've done to it in Mario Kart World, it barely even looks like the same track. I understand a lot of this is because these tracks not only have to be recontextualized to fit this game's new mechanics, 24 racer roster, gimmicks, and etc., but they also have to be recontextualized to fit inside of an open world. Because of that, there were way more liberties taken with these retro tracks than it looks like we've ever seen before. And that's coming from someone who loves 8 and 8 Deluxe, and specifically loves the GBA retro tracks like Ribbon Road and Cheeseland because they were so different and truly felt like they were modern reimaginings rather than just remasters or remakes. Again, Sky High Sundae, I have to show this here. This course was so boring in the original, and it looks sick now while still keeping the core mechanics that make Sky High Sundae Sky High Sundae. That's not to mention the other retro tracks that are based off, well, actually fun tracks. I'm so excited to see how tracks like Airship Fortress and Toad's Factory play in this new game. And also, apparently this is Peach Beach. I mean, yeah, I guess, but it looks so different. Just kind of goes to show how willing they are to really change up these tracks. Before we get into the next improvement, if you are enjoying this video and would like to help us hit our goal of 300,000 subscribers, check and see if you're subscribed. Most of our viewers aren't actually subscribed just because of the way YouTube works now, and it's completely free for you and would help us hit our goal of hitting 300,000 subscribers before the Switch 2 comes out. I don't know if that's even possible, but hey, it's our goal, so. Alright, back to the video. The next improvement I want to mention are the the cornucopia of new hazards in this game. There are so many new hazards and interactables and whatnot littered throughout the footage we can see of this title that it really does look like, even when the layout might be a bit more boring, Nintendo is trying their best to make sure there's never a dull moment while playing. New enemies like Skeeters, the Tokotoko, the massive Sandmargs, and even cannons that shoot out bonsai bills strapped to cars. There are so many more enemies too. There's also a lot of variety here. I mean, look at this. We got Goombas, a Goomba tower, a Goomba in a shoe, a Goomba in a skate, and Goombas in an inner tube. Not only are there a ton of different enemies or interactables, but they actually like fit into the courses and area of the world that they're on, which is just a great touch. It looks like there's a ton of different things to interact with or avoid all across this open world when you're driving in like the Grand Prix or knockout modes, which is super appreciated. I mean, this doesn't even touch on the literal vehicles you can then get in and drive. Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff to look out for. The next improvement I want to talk about is the music. Okay, duh, hear me out. Mario Kart music is always gonna be amazing. That's like the most lukewarm take you can give. But we've heard so many different arrangements just in the footage we've seen so far of not just past Mario Kart tracks that won't be in this game, but other Mario songs too from across the franchise, which is so dope. Specifically, it seems like the intermissions themselves, you know, where you're driving from track to track, seem to have a lot of referential music. This obviously makes sense because they're not original tracks that can really have their own theme. However, a good byproduct of that is the fact that we now get a bunch of Mario Kart inspired remixes of Bang & Mario songs from past games. Just some I've heard or seen mentioned on the wiki that I'm particularly excited to get in the full game are a remix of Steam Gardens from Mario Odyssey, Histocrat and the Credits theme from Super Mario 3D World, Gusty Garden and Bowie Base Galaxy from Galaxy, and so much more Mario Kart music from past entries than I can even pick. Obviously, all the tracks that are returning here are getting new themes, but there are a lot of Mario Kart courses that have no signs of life in this game, but still get brand new remixes for these intermissions, which is again really cool. I'm a big fan of that. The next improvement I want to talk about is gliding. I don't know if this is controversial, but I think gliding in Mario Kart 8 was terrible. It didn't like ruin the game for me or anything. I'm a big fan of the game. But if I could pick one very easy to improve thing for that game, it would definitely be the gliding. The fact that in order to get any sort of advanced precision, you have to enable motion controls just kind of goes to show that gliding in this game is essentially a glorified cutscene. It really does not have that much of an impact on the gameplay at all. And that's because the gliding mechanics in 8 are incredibly restrictive, even more so than 7 from when they were introduced. From what we've seen in Mario Kart World, that does not seem to be the case anymore. Even just in this clip right here, you can see more lateral direction from the player character here than what really felt possible in 8. I don't know if it's the fact that this is an open world, so maybe gliding just looks more free because you're actually gliding around an open world and not like immediately getting pulled in by Lakitu as soon as you veer 7 pixels off the race course. So I guess it could be an optical illusion. I mean, I haven't seen anyone like directly compare the gliding, so maybe it's not actually that much changed at all, but just from watching a bunch of the gameplay, it does look a lot more freeing, which is 100% an improvement because again, I was not a big fan of the gliding in Mario Kart 8. I just didn't think it was that fun. The next improvement I want to talk about is the water. The water physics in this game are sick. Driving underwater in Mario Kart 7 or 8 never really did anything for me. Its effect on the gameplay was barely noticeable, and it felt way more like a marketing gimmick that they could put on the back of the box for Mario Kart 7 than anything that actually impacted my experience while playing Mario Kart. Now, there's no more underwater. Instead, you're on top of the water, which is a great change for one main reason. Your car, or I guess vehicle because it's a boat now, is buoyant here. So if you jump off something in the water, you will then go underwater a little bit, then pop back out and can do a trick, which looks super satisfying. But what could you actually jump off in the water? Well, because you're driving on the water, items like blue shells that explode in the water can create massive shockwaves that send large ripples of water out that can then be used as ramps to trick off of. Not only is that just cool, but it automatically makes driving on the water in Mario Kart World have way more impact on the gameplay and ironically depth than when you're driving under the water in Mario Kart 7 and 8.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
The ninth improvement of Mario Kart World is something I'm really excited to talk about, and that is knockout mode. Now, Nintendo has been positioning this as if it's like one of the main selling points of this game. I don't know how many people are going to buy the new Mario Kart specifically because it has knockout mode. To me, this is just a nice bonus to anyone who is already gonna buy the game because it adds a lot more replayability. However, whether or not this is a true selling point for Mario Kart World aside, this is something I'm undoubtedly over the moon to have, especially considering I've been asking for this for a while. One of the concept trailers I made a while back was just an update for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It included a character boost pass which had a lot of costumes, that's already checked off in Mario Kart World, but it also included this brand new mode called Top Cup, which is essentially just knockout mode, but with the 12 players of Mario Kart 8 instead of the 24 players of Mario Kart World. As soon as we saw that World would have 24 players, I immediately started asking for this game mode again because it was too perfect for them to pass up on, and thank goodness they didn't, because knockout mode might be, in terms of how much time it took them to develop, which was not at all, I would have to assume. They already had the massive open world, so it's not like they had to design new routes for this mode. The time it took them to actually code in the system where it's like, okay, the last 4 racers drop out for each segment, compared to the amount of time this will add to at least my replayability, and most people playing this game's replayability, it's gotta be the best investment the developers at Nintendo have ever done. Really appreciate them adding this in. It was too easy of a layup for them not to, and it's one of my most anticipated features for when I get my hands on this game. Okay, the last and final improvement I want to talk about sounds a little bit vague at the start, but I'm gonna ask you all to stick with me. Mario Kart World has far improved personality from what we can see compared to pretty much any other past Mario game, but specifically I'll say Mario Kart 8 because that is the most recent. Mario Kart World is absolutely oozing personality, from the animations of the characters being far more expressive, the backgrounds on every track, to even the small stuff like the logo of the game itself and the font choice used throughout the menus. Mario Kart 8 from a personality perspective was a little sterile. 8 Deluxe came along a couple years later and improved it with stuff like more color in the menu backgrounds and minor tweaks like adding confetti to certain tracks. But even with those improvements, Mario Kart has had the same aesthetic for at least over a decade now, and I'm really glad to see it changing up here because Mario Kart World's personality just looks pretty sick. I like the funky non-traditional font they've used for the UI. I like the tread marks arcs and patterns that show up in a lot of the menus. I like the giant onomatopoeia text boxes that pop up when someone gets hit by a particularly powerful item. This game just seems to be oozing personality, which in my opinion is a big improvement. If we're gonna be playing this game for the next decade plus, hopefully not, but I mean, who knows? I'm really glad that they're adding the important stuff here, which is just the look and vibe of the game. It all looks really fun. So with that out of the way, those are the 10 biggest improvements I've found in Mario Kart World, at least in my opinion, although if you wanted to count every single improvement here in this game, you'd probably get up to the hundreds. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the video on screen right now. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and you know what? I agree with YouTube. I think you'll like it too. With that out of the way, I'm Thomas from the Switched Up signing off. Have a good one, guys. Peace.